People who meditate regularly are biologically younger. People who meditate regularly are biologically younger, but just one meditation experience can still have favorable influence.
Dr. Kara Fitzgerald, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I am thrilled to be here.
I'm really excited to have you. You are dealing with an area that I have become absolutely obsessed with, so methylation, which we'll explain to people what that is in a minute, but the idea of my epigenome is really controlling how my genetics express themselves, and that becomes really important. That had been on my radar for a long time, but I couldn't imagine what was actually happening. And so your book is called Younger You, which phenomenal book.
Thank you.
And it really goes into detail on this idea of what methylation is. And I think even though like for anybody hearing that for the first time, I promise we're going to bring you in, you're going to love it by the end of this and you will understand why it matters. But walk us through what I'll call the three layers: genetics, epigenetics, and then what methylation is and what brings them all together.
Yeah, for sure. So, our genetic material is static. It's not changing. We inherit some from mom and some from dad, and it's kind of packaged relatively carefully, and it doesn't change, and
Can you explain the packaging part? That's where this all starts to get interesting, and people that know it well sort of throw that one off the cuff. How is one's DNA, which I assume is what you mean, packaged?
Yes, yeah. Well, I mean, we have a lot of it. If we end to end, I think it wraps around the world twice. If we did, if we spread it all out from all of our cells,
One single strand
each
of
strand
DNA.
within a cell is about 6 feet. It's a ton. It's like but it's microscopic. We have to wrap it up extraordinarily carefully to fit it into a cell. I mean, it's mind-boggling. And so it's wrapped around proteins called histones, and then histones are grouped in 4. So there's just wrap, grouped in 4, and these little groups of 4 are nucleosomes, and then they're packaged together in what's called a chromatin, and then ultimately a chromosome. What's extraordinary is that wrapping helps regulate. So this is the epigenetics that you're talking about. So we need to open it to allow a given gene to be expressed, and then we kind of wrap it and tuck it back in, or we keep it on. And so again, gene, DNA, genetics, epi above the gene. So it's all of these variables that go into allowing genes to turn on and turn off. It's all of the biochemical marks or imprints, whatever you want to call them. And there's many of them, 100 plus, that are working together, engaged in allowing genes to be on and off.
And is it the sirtuins that are doing the actual reading of the DNA and putting the methylation markers on the DNA? Is that what does that?
No, the methylation markers are placed down on the cytosine nucleotide using DNA methyltransferase.
Okay.
And then and there's a family of DNA methyltransferase enzymes that will do it at different times. I mean, I think this is where we can get in and have our lifestyle actually influence what happens during cell division.
All right, so to bring this back up a level for people that probably now feel like I've drugged them down in the weeds too much. So what became really interesting for me is we've got this careful packaging of the DNA.
Yeah.
And the way that we express or fail to express a gene within our DNA is by wrapping it, so essentially hiding it and saying, don't read this.
Yes.
And in your book, you said something really interesting, which is that if the DNA are the language of our genetics, the methylation is the punctuation. And so it says, stop reading here, line break, this is a new paragraph, so this is an eye cell, this is a heart cell, this is a skin cell, and oh, by the way, you're in the eye, so eye cell, express yourself.
Right.
And so you've got all of that in one sort of, without methylation would be one run-on sentence.
Yeah, that's right.
And so the methylation goes in and says...
And God knows what would be turned on. Yeah, it would just be a big mess. And we think that this big mess is part of the aging journey. But yes.
That you begin losing your punctuation.
Yeah,
and
that's
now
right.
I'm confused.
Or it's distorted. It's not where it's supposed to be.
The word is misspelled
Yeah.
or out of place in the wrong paragraph. See, that's really helpful for me. So once I had that paradigm, that understanding of, okay, the DNA says, your eye should be this big versus my eye is a different size. My heart cell functions like this, yours functions like that.
Yeah.
So we each have our own way that all of this is going to express, like you said, half from mom, half from dad. But then over the process of aging, that gets, I forget the word, wonky. It goes wonky, I think, to use the word that you often use. Yeah. My scientific word is wonky. So
funny.
that begins to break down.
Mm-hmm.
When it's breaking down, what exactly is happening? The methylation marks are literally just missing?
So a few things are happening, and that's an awesome question. I think mechanistically we have some idea, but why it's happening is a really hot topic right now in the scientific community. So when you look at the epigenome of a younger individual as compared to an older individual, it's fascinating. Like genes that are on in youth are inhibited in age, and it tends to be that genes that are helpful and beneficial are on in youth, and then genes that are actually, and those same genes are turned off in age. But it's predictable across all of us. I mean, you can't avoid these changes, I think, unless we're working on it right now. So
we can't avoid them yet.
Right, that's right. We can't avoid it. Well, and we're starting to learn. I mean, this is what I wrote about. We're starting to learn, lifestyle interventions that can help prevent the extent of the breakdown.
And rewind them in some cases.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. As looking at the biological age clock. So the question, I think, is with this predictability, is it just damage from wear and tear in life, or is there some sort of a programmed element to this that's driving the aging journey?
Meaning, are we programmed to die?
Exactly, which is as predictable and sort of elegant in its structure as, developing a human during embryogenesis or early infancy when infants are just aging at this accelerated pace. They're like superhumans. I have a toddler at home, and actually she's turning 4, but so she's moving out. But but just watching her, so thinking epigenetically and watching my kid, when she was an infant, sort of heal, like you can see her skin knitting before your eyes. I mean, or her learning new language, or her going from sitting to standing to walking. I mean, it's all happening at this record pace, and this developmental, this accelerated developmental place is part of her epigenetic journey. It's part of her aging journey, and that changes over time. And then we hit maturation and sexual maturation, puberty, et cetera, and then women hit premenopause and peri and post and on, and all these are driven epigenetically. And then we've got this aging phenomena where things break down, where we're at risk of developing cancer and dementia and cardiovascular disease and diabetes, et cetera. And when you look at the epigenome, it looks like it's programmed in there. It's something that all of us thinking about it would like to change and have some control over.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting blend of the philosophy and the science. So if we are pre-programmed to die, what are the markers that do that? So I really want to understand the idea of methylation. So I'm realizing now as I'm formulating this question that I have created an image in my head of like a dollop of glue, basically, that just says, stop here. One is that what it looks like? Because your book goes into this idea very extensively of methyl donors. So things that you eat that generate, they're building blocks of the goop, as I'm imagining it, that creates the ability for the body to put those markers. So you have material needed to put markers.
Yes, that's
and then
right.
you have the placing of the markers in a way that promotes longevity versus
that's
dying.
Right. Yeah.
So
That's right.
help me understand those two elements.
Yeah.
So what is it that gives us the methylation? And then what in this paradigm where we assume it's pre-programmed, even if we're just doing a thought experiment right now, where does it get moved from and to that begins this experience of aging?
So methylation, there are hundreds of methyltransferase enzymes. These guys are putting a
So
methyl group,
methylation is a whole bunch of different things.
like a lot. It's a carbon and 3 hydrogens. They're, ubiquitous in nature. And our body just, we evolved using methyl groups for a lot of things, a lot of really important
If they're
stuff.
the same at the molecular level, how do they end up being so many different things?
Well, it depends on what enzyme is using it. So there's a methylation cycle that's whirring in our body all of the time, and this is where we're using B12 and folate and betaine and choline, et cetera, to produce the universal methyl donor. So this is a cofactor. This works with the enzyme, and it's called S-adenosine methionine. So methylation cycle is whirring in our body, and incidentally, we become less effective at this as we age for a variety of reasons, and we can talk about that. And secondarily, global hypomethylation of the epigenome is a phenomenon. So if you were to weigh all the methyl groups on our DNA, in an aging individual as opposed to a young individual, they'll have a net less.
So globally, they're just producing less, and therefore it's being used on. And one thing, correct me if I'm wrong, methylation is used to repair DNA. So if it breaks and it broke somewhere where now a missing piece of punctuation is gone, I need to remethylate that to say, oh yeah, remember you're an I cell, so I need to hide.
Yes, we do, in part, yes. And the folate cycle, which is part of the methylation group, gets in there and helps with DNA repair too. There's a lot of pieces in the DNA repair puzzle. So methylation cycle is always whirring along. We're making this cofactor, CME we call it, and then CME works with the methyltransferase enzymes, all the hundreds of them in the body. And my focus has been DNA methylation, and so CME is used there. So we want to keep this methylation cycle whirring efficiently all the time at any level. Like my kiddo, my toddler, she needs to be accessing loads of methyl groups as well. Like we just all through life. I mean, this is one of the reasons that we prescribe folate during pregnancy, and even preconception. Like we really want to be thinking about making sure this is happening. So methylation needs to be moving forward, but we don't, and we'll talk about this, we don't necessarily just want to throw a ton of vitamins at it. We would have already discovered the fountain of youth, right? If that was going to be successful, we could just take a ton of folate and B12.
And the reason that we even connect those ideas is because the vitamins are the precursor that allows us to actually make it.
Yeah, but we want to eat these in our food, and in some cases take vitamins. So we want to be thinking about the methyl donor cycle. We want to make sure we've got enough SAM. We want to make sure methylation is happening, and we do that, just keeping our methylation cycle humming. And then on the other hand, we want to work on directing where those methyl groups are going. And that is what we think may be the role of polyphenols, of the color.
Which you get from plants.
Yeah, that's right. They seem to influence the DNA methyltransferase enzymes and perhaps support placement of methyl groups where we want them.
To just put a point on that for a second. So from an evolutionary standpoint, we have evolved to eat plants, and the idea of thinking of these as signaling molecules, I think, becomes very important. So literally it gets inside your body and it will so I've heard it referred to as nutrition partitioning. So it's like nutrient partitioning. So, hey, I'm a traffic cop, right? So I'm saying you go here, you go over here, but it's something I eat. Is it that it's the presence of certain polyphenols tells my body to do the direction, or the mere presence of those polyphenols? Do polyphenols make it into my bloodstream?
They influence the behavior of the enzyme. So going back to the DNA methyltransferases.
Are polyphenols in my bloodstream?
Yeah, they should be some of them would be measurable. Yeah, I mean, some of them are transformed by our microbiome, and they become secondary compounds. But yeah. Mm-hmm.
This episode is sponsored by Athletic Greens. Get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. Simply visit athleticgreens.com/impact theory. Now enjoy the episode. It's so weird. This is so complicated. This is like some alien invasion type stuff.
That's really funny.
But really, like, the more I'm beginning to understand it, and trust me, I am well aware my knowledge is so surface compared to yours, but the more I understand this, the more I'm like, God, man, this is like really intricate.
Yeah.
And because it's so intricate and complicated, I'm really surprised that what I eat can have such a profound impact. In fact, I want to give people one of the punchlines of the book. You did an 8-week intervention, which is like a blip. A blip that's so short.
Yeah.
And in 8 weeks, you were able to get people to see on what they call the Horvath clock, which is a clock of biological age, to go backwards 3 years.
Yes.
Which is insanity. In 8 weeks, just based, I can't remember, exercise was part of it.
Yes.
So it was diet and exercise.
A modest exercise prescription, meditation, twice daily, 10 minutes minimum. Diet, we gave them additional greens powder, so more of those polyphenols. We gave them a probiotic, and we wanted them to sleep well. So we focused on sleep hygiene as well. So those 5 variables we worked with.
That's so bananas to me. And so oftentimes I'll have a conversation with somebody before the camera starts rolling, and then we'll hit on something so interesting. I'm like, we should say that on camera, and that's when we'll start. You said I should be testing all of my internal biological markers because I do all this weird stuff, whether it's cold exposure
and you
or
commit.
whatever.
Yeah, I mean, you do it.
Yes, I do. The reason that I haven't is one time, like if somebody would just show up at my house and draw blood or whatever, I would do it, like no problem. And then the other is I have one really bad strategy, and that's I am always trying to ask how much stress can I endure. And so when I think about longevity, I know, like, I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't do drugs, but I do stress.
Yeah.
And so I'm a little worried about what my Horvath clock is going to say.
So you haven't done your biological age yet?
I haven't. No. I do want to. And admittedly, it is the friction of having to leave. But if I wasn't worried about the answer, I would have gone out of my way to figure it out. But stress does concern me. And I steer by how well I sleep. And so when I get into a period where because I never set an alarm. Literally, I mean, look, if I had a 4 a.m. flight, I would set an alarm.
Yeah.
But barring that, I wake up when I wake up.
Yes.
But as I get stressed or excited, my sleep will reduce.
Sure.
And so I'm always a little, especially right now, I am really going hard at this particular moment.
Yeah.
And so I'm a wee bit
Are you meditating though? Like
yes.
What
Yeah.
You do?
Yeah. I don't, like when they say, if you don't have 5 minutes to meditate, you're the person who most needs meditation.
Yes.
I believe in that so aggressively that, I meditate in fact, I meditate more in my hyper stressful periods than I do when my life is more even keel, because I am so aware. One, quality of life is so hugely impacted by meditation, and then two, my performances.
Yeah.
Let's really get deep on it for a second. Let's assume that you're right, that we are pre-programmed to die.
Yeah.
And so now I'm looking at it from an evolutionary standpoint, and I'm saying, okay, it's a really stressful environment. If it's a really stressful environment, we got to get rid of these old fuckers because they're going to take resources. So let's just speed things up a little bit and get them out of the way so that we have enough resources for the next generation. If I'm right, that would make predictions such that people would live for a shorter period of time. Now I'm setting you up. But if I'm right, would it not predict that if you were pregnant, let's say, during a stressful time, that those children would live shorter lives?
It's been demonstrated. I mean, it's already been demonstrated. Like, you can look at the Dutch hunger winter, or, I mean, of course, there was food famine, another kind of a stress. I mean, we certainly see total life stress, maternal stress and experience, even, a generation out, grandparents, and probably further out. It will absolutely influence epigenetic expression towards earlier mortality, as well as an increased incidence of the chronic diseases of aging. So stress plays a huge role. We translate
stress in the mother, stress in the father.
Both. Dad's right there. So when we talk about stress, I want to say psychic stress, but I also want to include physical stress in there. So physical stress could be change to eating, excess food or insufficient food. I mean, I just want to kind of expand that. But yes, in the realm of epigenetics, dad's a big player, granddad's a big player, great granddad is a big player.
So I remember the first time I heard somebody say, that trauma can be passed on.
Yes.
And I was like,
It's like photosynthesis. I mean, I sort of think about it. It's like psychic. A psychic experience is translated into biochemical marks that then
How do they
influence.
pass on? Like, because how it would have to then be encoded in the sperm and the egg.
Yes. Onto their
How
DNA.
is that encoded into the sperm and the egg? And
Well,
do you
via
predict, if we can't already,
methylation.
will in the future somebody be able to look at sperm and say, ooh, this
Yeah.
you would pass
Yeah.
on stress or
Yes.
whatever.
Yes. So Moshe Sef, who was a co-author and an advisor on our study, it says that yes, that there will come a time that we'll be able to predict outcome in offspring by looking at patterns from mom and dad, or even looking at patterns in utero. That we'll be able to actually change those patterns so that we can forego some of the fallout that we would otherwise succumb to.
That is crazy. The
Yeah.
thought that I could go in and work with a fertility doctor to say, okay, look at the current state of
at my
my
epigenome. Yeah.
sperm and see,
Yeah.
like, is this going to be a problem? Am I going to pass something on? This is where we're going. Like, that's actually going to
Yeah.
happen.
Yes. 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 Yes.
That is bananas.
Yes.
So what's happening then is you're saying that there is some global marking on my DNA via the methylation that then, or I guess it doesn't have to be global, although I would assume it will be, because it's going to be expressing itself in my body, but then it's also going to express itself in pregnancy.
Yeah, so here's the thing. And let me just say too, there's some cool research on the heritability of exercise habits and how you can hand down some of that to your offspring. So you can change the methylome. That's what we call the methylation genome. You know, you can change the methylome favorably or not, I suppose, if you're a non-exerciser, and hand down some of those benefits to offspring. Yeah.
That is fascinating.
So
That's
here's
really freaky.
here's what happens. This is my understanding. Your methylation marks. You and your wife conceive. You have a fertilized egg. You know, your methylation marks, her methylation marks, are handed down, but then they're largely removed. So 10-11 translocation enzymes actually remove methylation marks, you know, from the fertilized eggs. For the most part, like we remove the bulk of them.
So don't be old. That's like the punchline of that moment.
Yeah, you're cleaning the slate. You're allowing the a genesis of a new human. Let me just finish this. Not entirely. There's some of your methylation patterns translate over, as do your wife, and that is the heritability portion of DNA methylation. So it's not all lost. And so that might be your exercise habits or, you know, some of the stress that you've experienced. And that actually might carry a few generations back.
That means that there's what I'll call intelligence imbued in that system, where there's a decision-making process that says remove these, don't remove these.
Yeah, so what gets to stay and what doesn't. There's something called the imprintome, and that is, that's being studied by Randy Girdle. So you know the agouti mice studies probably, right?
Because of you, yes. But it's worth telling
They're
people
really important.
because this is so crazy, the most cited thing in science.
Yes, it's so fascinating. So I'll tell about that paper in a second, but just to kind of wrap this up, the imprintome is some of what can be inherited from mom and dad, some of the methylation patterns that can be inherited from mom and dad. And Randy is actually really interested in studying that now because some of them can translate into pretty serious diseases. So he wants to work on that. But also in the imprintome can house the benefits of exercise if you've had a good habit, good exercise habit, and some other really cool stuff too.
You said that there is a signature for trauma, an epigenetic signature for trauma, but there's also then one for wisdom.
Yeah.
And
we think so. Yeah.
That to me this is so much more complicated than people think.
Yeah. Yeah. So resilience. So trauma, we've studied trauma. I think that there's a sort of an obsession with studying trauma patterns, not just in the epigenome, but beyond that. And so we know trauma can be carried over. Trauma can be established in early life, and then it can translate as chronic disease later on, and it can translate to having a really poor stress tolerance. I mean, it can translate into all sorts of things. So yes, trauma has a strong influence. Resilience does too, but we know less about how that translates. That's what we need to study. And that goes back to the idea that Moshe Sef posited, where, if we understand these patterns well, we can look at you early on or look at an embryo or a fetus and decide, these are resilience patterns, and if they're not, we can correct them, et cetera. I mean, the era of epigenetics and epigenetic diagnostics is just beginning, and it's just going to continue to grow. But we should be putting energy towards studying resilience and what that looks like. And then to your point, studying wisdom. So honestly, we're in such a rabbit hole, but let me just say, because you talk about the Yamanaka factors quite a bit. I know I've seen you talk to David Sinclair at least twice, and you're always yammering about his Yamanaka research and reversing aging, causing aging by messing up epigenetics, and then reversing aging, cleaning it up with these 3 of the 4 Yamanaka factors that clean up methylation specifically. They bring it back to a more youthful pattern. So we have to ask ourselves, in this quest for youth, and this was something that I posed at the very end of my book, if we're going to turn back the hands of time by decades, are we going to, by extension, remove the molecules of wisdom that have embedded in our DNA? So, I was listening to you guys talk about, if you had a life-threatening illness, you might just go for the Yamanaka factors to see if you can turn it back. Would you lose some of this extraordinary knowledge that you've obtained on your journey? I mean, you've done some amazing work in your life, and some of that is biologically embedded in your epigenome. I mean, what are we doing by turning back the hands of time? Are we at risk of losing some of these, these marks of wisdom, these beneficial changes as well?
That's one thing I found really interesting about your book, and we're not going to forget the mice, so people following
along.
Oh, right,
okay.
Is in the book you talk about unintended consequences, and so you lay out this incredible book, which we'll get into some of the things that you should be eating and all that stuff in a minute, but you lay out this incredible plan for how people can reverse the biological clock. You'll never be able to reverse the chronological clock, obviously, but that your biological aging, you can move backwards. And then you say, but hey, be careful, because we don't know where all of this is going yet. And so you do have to be very thoughtful about those unintended consequences.
Yeah. And you guys have talked a lot about, teratomas or tumors and cancer and so forth. But yeah, I wonder about some of the, the less understood shifts that happen with maturation, et cetera.
And this is why I'm obsessed with whole food. So yes. Like I try I do supplement vitamin D when there's not enough sun, but if there is sun, then I don't supplement and I go get the sun, because there's probably things that we don't understand about the skin is doing something when it actually feels the radiation, on it. Let's talk about Athletic Greens, my friends, the all-in-one daily drink to support better health and peak performance. To help each of us be at our best, AG1 by Athletic Greens simplifies the path to better nutrition by giving you the one thing with all the best things. One tasty scoop of AG1 contains 75 vitamins, minerals, and whole food-sourced ingredients, including a multivitamin, multimineral, probiotic, greens, superfood blend, and more in one convenient daily serving. And right now, Athletic Greens is doubling down on supporting your immune system. They're offering our audience a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. Simply visit athleticgreens.com/impact theory. That's athleticgreens.com/impact theory and get your free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free travel packs today. athleticgreens.com/impact theory. All right, guys, take care and be legendary. All right, so walk us through the mice.
Yeah. It's interesting to me in the longevity space, because I come from functional medicine. I come from, I have a nutrition background. I'm a naturopath by training, and we're obsessed with these things. So nutrition has this extraordinarily profound, generationally powerful influence on gene expression. And Randy Girdle showed it, Randy Girdle and Waterland in 2003. It's interesting to me because that was when we mapped the genome. We figured out the human genome in around 2003, and we started to realize it didn't house all the answers, that our genes aren't our destiny. In that same year, Girdle and Waterland published their agouti mouse study, which incidentally they couldn't publish. I think it took them 16 different journal submissions, and finally to a really low tier journal they were accepted. Yeah, people were like, yeah, whatever. Their peer reviewers did not buy what they saw.
Wow.
Didn't buy it, didn't accept it. So what they showed, they used an agouti mouse, which has the agouti gene expressed. And in animals, and in mice, this means that when this gene is on, they're blonde and they're obese. They're very visual. They don't look like a normal, house mouse. And they die from, obesity-related causes. I mean, it's pretty extraordinary. So you can get this mouse and do research studies on them. And it was actually Waterland. Girdle credits Waterland for the idea of testing nutritional intervention in this mouse model. Like, can they methylate and inhibit the gene? And so that's what they set out to do. Actually, they initially wanted to look at what methyl donor deficiency would look like. So insufficient methyl donors was their first study, and the mice died. They weren't even
faster than normal.
They died. Yeah, they just died immediately. Yeah, they didn't survive at all. The offspring. So these were in pregnant agouti mice dams, and they fed them a methyl donor deficient diet, and offspring were dead on arrival.
Whoa.
Yeah. So that's how important these methyl donors are in our diet. Like, they're exquisitely important. So that was study one, and they didn't publish. That was just communication that I had with Randy Girdle. So study two was, let's increase methyl donors. Let's give these pregnant agouti mice some folate, some B12, some choline, some betaine. Let's give them that. And lo and behold, that agouti gene was hypermethylated and shut off. So a lot of methyl groups, a lot of the glue or whatever your glue blobs, shut the gene off. And their offspring were brown, like they look like wild mice. They just like normal wild mice. But here's the kicker. So these are just nutrients to give to the pregnant and dams, and they reverted the offspring to what they call pseudoagouti, and it went on for generations. So one laboratory looked at how many generations and calculated 5. I think Girdle and Waterland went back 3 in their lab. So nutrients given to the pregnant mouse resulted in a generational influence on gene expression.
For 5 generations?
Yes. 5 generations in one study.
So I no longer had to sort of hypermethylate them, and they would keep coming out as normal brown mice.
Yeah, or on a continuum. So it's not an all or nothing. Like some might have a little speckle of blonde. Like it's a continuum of how hypermethylated that gene is. But in general, there was a trend towards turning off hypermethylating and inhibiting that gene, and therefore restoring these mice to the sort of brown wild type mice, and shutting down the diseases that they were vulnerable to.
Whoa. Now this
Yeah, big deal. I mean, that's how
huge.
powerful nutrients are. And that study was ignored at first. They didn't believe it.
It just seemed unreasonable.
It just didn't seem possible
Have
that they
people
could
replicated
influence
it?
genetic expression. Yes.
That's so nuts. That's really
Let me tell
profound.
you another kicker. This is a crazy story. So another postdoc in Girdle's lab looked at this same model. So again, the agouti pregnant mice, and gave them genistein, the soy isoflavone. So a soy phytochemical. Same effect as the methyl donors. So a polyphenol, nothing to do with that methylation cycle that I talked to you about at the beginning, nothing to do with B12 and folate, et cetera, but somehow changed methylation, shut off the agouti gene. Riddle me that.
I was going to say, so I don't even understand enough to know how weird that is. So
It's pretty weird because it didn't, so the DNA methyltransferases use CME to put methyl groups onto the gene to shut that gene down. But genistein is a polyphenol. It doesn't influence DNA. It isn't making SAMe. It isn't giving the ingredients to shut it down. So it's doing something else. And they speculate that it actually repositions the gene, sort of making the available methyl groups able to get in there and act. So it's doing something else. And they speculated, just maybe just like opening that agouti gene up for ready access to the fewer methyl donors in circulation or something. So Girdle and his lab said, look, you guys, we think nutrients are beneficial, and of course they are. But I was taught we just pee them out. There's no harm. You'll use what you need. You get rid of the rest.
So many times, yeah.
Right? They showed 5 generations that these nutrients influenced. And so their conclusion
really
in that
scary.
2003,
That's really scary.
well, it had this powerful favorable influence on these
Yeah, but
mice,
if
on
it's
these
doing
offspring.
good things, then
Right.
it's doing bad things.
So that's what they said. We long thought these were basically inconsequential, right? I mean, medicine, we evolved not even paying attention. Physicians aren't even trained with nutritional training. Like, we just don't even think nutrients are a big deal at all. And these guys completely changed that conversation. And in their abstract, the end sentence was, we need to pay attention to how powerful these are, because they can have unintended consequences. So, and then they showed genistein does the same thing, and it's not even a methyl donor. And so in that study, the postdoc who conducted that study said, well, you've got a vegan mom who's eating a whole lot of soy, so, loaded up on genistein. Maybe she's eating grains with folic acid, fortified grains, which we're riddled with in this country, and layer in a multivitamin, a prenatal, and you've got a ton of methyl donors or nutrients acting like methyl donors. And that may not be a safe phenomena. Now, we know we need methyl donors in pregnancy, no doubt about it. We need them throughout our lives. We really need to be bathing our genes in healthy methylation. But yeah, it can get a little squirrely when we're using isolated micronutrients and dosing really high and layering in with other nutrients that have an influence on methylation that we don't even understand yet, like genistein. And so it goes back to your original point of diet, whole food matrix, eating how we evolved, getting some vitamin D from the sun. I mean, just sort of having that be our touch point, sort of, our foundation. And then layering on some of these interventions if we need them, if there's a reason.
Man, being a pregnant woman does not sound stress-free. It's like you can't be stressed because that's going to pass on. You've got to be hyper careful about what you eat. You can't just blast your system with all these vitamins. Damn. Yeah.
Well, there is some cool research. Actually, the folks at Grow Baby Health are friends of mine, and they're using our program and layering it into what they're doing. And they've got extraordinary birth outcomes, like their incidence of common childhood illnesses or, gestational diabetes, some of the complications of pregnancy, they're like nil. Their incidence of autism in offspring from this clinic are, maybe 1. If that, I put the stats in. Yeah, they've published on them, and they are using micronutrients. They are using a prenatal. So I want to clarify. I don't want anybody to get anxious. There absolutely is a place for these micronutrients in pregnancy, and you get them from a whole foods diet, and you avoid folic acid fortification, and just pay attention to how much soy you're eating, et cetera. So there's some ducks to put in a row, but we still, micronutrients are generally healthy in pregnancy.
Wow. All right, let's get into the do's and don'ts. So let's set aside exercise for now and just talk about diet. What should people be eating?
Yeah. So we want methyl donors, like up the wazoo, loads of methyl donors. So we want to be doing greens, lots of greens. We want to be doing, leafy, good greens, spinach
Collard
and
greens.
kale. Yeah, totally. We want to be doing, we want to be eating some beets, not a ton, but maybe a couple of
Why
small
not a ton?
beets. They're pretty high in sugar, and we don't need a ton of them. But
their
betaine
deep red gives us something?
Betaine, yeah, betaine will help whir the methylation cycle. It will help with methylation, beets. Seeds, mushrooms, shiitake, enoki, maitake. These are rich with choline, folate. Mushrooms are really extraordinary. Wild mushrooms.
They're so gross.
Are they gross?
I can't deal.
So, okay, fine. So for those folks who like mushrooms, eat mushrooms. There are alternatives, like so mushrooms are
I'll
rich
hide
in
them in my
choline.
food if I have
you
to,
can,
like, if
or
they're
you can
that
take
good.
them, or you can take them encapsulated if you want to, which I
Word,
do
if we can,
sometimes.
but is it a whole mushroom, just like
Yeah.
ground up?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not like it's a isolated compound from the mushroom. It's
Compound X.
actually
The
just
whole mushroom.
encapsulated, shredded
Yeah.
mushroom.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. You can.
I
You
get
can
down with
get that.
They
You
do that
can,
with liver as well, right?
yes. In fact, that's how I ingest my liver because I
Hey.
don't cook it.
Fair.
Yeah. Liver is a multivitamin in a food matrix. It is so extraordinary. You don't need to eat a ton of it. You don't have to have it every day. If you get 3 servings a week, you're getting just a massive amount of good folate and B12, et cetera.
Is there a encapsulated liver that you recommend?
Yes, it is. I have a whole list of products that I like in the resource section that we vetted for purity. New Zealand source liver it has, in my research, the cleanest reputation. They seem to be doing a really good job. So methyl donors, eggs, another beautiful source of choline that you want to be getting. Yeah, so greens, seeds, some nuts, fats
do the
from
seeds
fish.
and nuts have to be raw?
You know, raw is better, but I would
Because
not.
I'm cooking out some of the micronutrients, or because
Yeah, and the delicate fats. So, they're more beneficial in the raw state.
Because
That's
like
it.
raw pumpkin seeds sounds pretty gnarly.
They're not
But
bad.
baked pumpkin seeds
Are really good. Yeah, that's right. Go with what you're going to consume.
So it's not like baked becomes bad for me, it's just not as good.
Don't eat like charred, obviously. Don't eat really poor quality. Try to get a good quality, but I eat roasted pumpkin seeds. I love them. I throw them on my salad. You're going to get some nutrient for your bang for your buck in that structure.
And do we have like a short seed list of the good ones?
We really like pumpkin. We really like sunflower, sesame. Those are good. So seeds, mushrooms, liver, greens, eggs, salmon or other really fatty fish. And those are going to keep that methylation cycle whirring. Those are some of the key ingredients that will keep methylation whirring. Mushrooms. And then we've got these traffic directors, the polyphenols. And so those are all your colorful fruit and veg. I mean, some of our favorites are curcumin, turmeric. Curcumin is an extraordinary.
Those are the same thing?
Turmeric is the spice that houses curcumin.
Got it.
So curry. Do you like curry? Can you do a
do.
curry?
I
Awesome.
eat curry frequently.
Awesome. Golden milk is one of my favorites. I love
What's
curry.
golden milk?
Golden milk is a turmeric drink. Turmeric and a little bit of coconut milk and little pepper and some other spices, and it's just delicious. It's a time immemorial drink in India.
All right.
It's delicious. So methyl donors plus these polyphenol compounds that appear to direct where methylation is happening, and we want to load up. And again, blueberries, curcumin, EGCG, and the other catechins in green tea.
I don't know what that is. I know what green tea is.
You know
but-
green tea.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
green tea is loaded with these phytochemicals that are gene whisperers, DNA methylation adaptogens, whatever you want to call them. I mean, just helping with optimal epigenetic expression. That's what we think.
Okay.
And most of the research at the time of our book is in vitro, so in cell studies or in animal studies, but they seem to be able to turn back on some of the genes that are shut off in the aging journey. So these compounds have far-reaching beneficial effect. They're anti-cancer, they are anti-inflammatory, they're antimicrobial and beneficial to our microbiome. They're anti-aging in a lot of ways, senolytics like quercetin.
What's a senolytic?
Senolytic helps inhibit production of the zombie cells, those pro-inflammatory
Senescent cells?
Yeah. So just think colorful elements of your fruits and vegetables far and wide have this methylation adaptogenic effect, seem to be able to direct DNA methylation.
What's your take on fruit? I think of fruit and vegetables as being so different. I even think of berries as different from fruits.
Yeah. Most of the fruits have important compounds, but we don't, obviously, because of the sugar impact, you don't want to be eating tons of them. So you need to be mindful.
Can I eat as many raspberries as I want?
You know, if your blood sugar is in reasonable control, I mean, do you wear a continuous glucose monitor?
I have many times.
Yep,
I'm not currently,
yep.
but yes.
So pay attention. You know, just pay attention to how your body responds. Like we recommend blueberries on a daily basis as one of the, or any dark berries. Raspberries would be in there. If you're going to load up on them, you know, you might want to just pay attention to your sugar and see how much you can tolerate. It's going to be different for all of us. But if you have your raspberries maybe on a salad and you've got a higher fat dressing and some fiber in there, you know, each of it, it'll be different for each of us. But super important information is contained in raspberries and all of these. And we're just starting to understand how sophisticated the information is. Like I was reading, this is a cell study, but curcumin in turmeric can inhibit mTOR in multiple myeloma cells. So in a cancer, I know, and it's a cell study. So it can hypermethylate the mTOR gene in multiple myeloma cells in a cell study. By comparison, curcumin has also been shown in cell studies to turn on a hypermethylated BRCA gene. So the BRCA genes are major, highly important tumor suppressor genes. So they keep us clear of cancer. A functioning BRCA gene keeps us clear of cancer, takes care of DNA repair, et cetera. It does a lot of stuff. A functioning BRCA, we're not talking about the BRCA mutation, but a functioning BRCA gene can actually be hypermethylated and inhibited, and then it's associated with all sorts of cancers. So
by getting hypermethylated or
yes,
hypomethylated?
Hyper. So it's shut down and no longer available to do its work. Hypermethylation, lots of methyl groups inhibit it from being on. So curcumin will allow that to be re-expressed. So in mTOR, it can shut it off in a multiple myeloma cell, but BRCA, it can turn back on to go do its good work.
All right, so let me say that in layman's terms. So mTOR, which is basically grow. So
Yes.
hey, body, grow muscle, grow tumors.
Yes.
So we're shutting down mTOR, and then we are removing the errant punctuation that is making the sentence impossible to read in the BRCA gene.
We're turning the BRCA back on and allowing it to function.
That's crazy.
So it does two opposite things. Curcumin and turmeric does two opposite things in cell studies. It's amazing. So do some of the other players like luteolin or quercetin. What else? Genistein. So going back to soy, that's a really important polyphenol.
I think of soy as being bad.
Yeah, I would say that if you can get an organic and perhaps fermented soy, it's an important polyphenol. I mean, it's just got important, potent power, for the most part, beneficial power. I just wouldn't overdo it.
Do I, as a guy, need to worry about the estrogen?
No, I don't think that there's enough, and you don't want to swim in it. You know, have a serving of it every now and again if you like it. We don't use it in the intensive part of the program, but we do allow it for vegans in the program, or when you transition off of the intensive 8 weeks, you can include it. And they're important polyphenols. So these guys are the traffic director. So we want to load our body up with this collection of compounds. And there's a 30-page nutrition appendix that will give you the details, like all of the foods that you can access to get some of these really important epinutrients. As a category, both of them, we're calling them epinutrients.
Whew. Okay, so there's a reason that your book is robust. It is not brief in its incredible description of what's going on and what we need to do to combat all of that stuff. This is really, really incredible stuff to me. I want to run through just a synopsis, and there's been a few things that we haven't gone really deep on that is probably worth just reminding people that they should be doing. But so, all right, we've got our genetic code, which isn't changing, it's not going anywhere, but you have the epigenome, which is probably way more important. Like when you look at the genetics of a plant, it's way more robust than the genetics of a human. And yet, humans are pretty damn complicated.
Right.
Because of this epigenetics of what is expressed, what's not expressed.
Yes.
What you eat has a huge impact on what's expressed. Going back to the mice study, it's pretty crazy that you can alter the pregnant mother's diet and it has a 5-generational impact. That's so crazy. I really think that's going to give women heart palpitations. But if I can help them reframe it, that it can be a negative impact or it can be a positive impact, as in the study was looking at the good things that you can pass on, which is pretty incredible. Okay, so we've talked about all that. Now, let's give a quick breakdown. What is the role of stress, sleep, and exercise?
Right. Incidentally, we have what we call the Younger You hybrid in here for pregnant women and preconception. So we put together what we think is a good eating pattern. So if you have palpitations, ladies, and if you need it, just take a look at the book, because you can totally eat for your genes and your offspring. So if we're not sleeping, we're aging. I mean, sleep is an essential component of good epigenetic expression. Insomnia ages people. And that's been demonstrated looking again at DNA methylation. But it's a lot better. So I just walked through all the hacks that I've used. Cold room, going to bed on time, not setting my alarm. That's a big thing for me. I use melatonin and magnesium. I find both to be helpful. I use meditation. So I do meditation. Sometimes I'll listen to rain. I'll just all sorts of different, very dark room. So we need to sleep. We need to figure out how to get it. It's really important with repair, and anyway, on and on. Stress is potently pro-aging, and again, as we've been talking about, it can be generational, and it will influence morbidity and mortality. But I think stress is one of the most pro-aging experiences that we can have, and that we need to be paying attention to turning it off and not allowing it to drag us by the hair. So stress is very pro-aging. I think the clock that we used, the Horvath 2013, the flagship sort of gold standard clock that we used in our study, a full 25% of those methylation sites are influenced by the stress response. 25%. There's no other factor that this so singularly influences the clock as these, what they call glucocorticoid response elements on the clock. So that to me suggests that stress plays a huge role. Huge. Sleep, stress. Conversely, the data on meditation, on Tai Chi, on yoga is extraordinary. Even a single exercise can have favorable changes. We can make a difference pretty quick if we continue to do it over time. I mean, just think cell division after cell division after cell division, you can hand down these favorable changes. So if we continue with our good habits, we can have these lasting and really powerful improvements. People who meditate regularly are biologically younger. People who meditate regularly are biologically younger, but just one meditation experience can still have favorable influence. Even yoga, a weekly yoga habit, showed beneficial changes in the epigenome. A weekly yoga habit. So, we got this. We can do it. You don't have to retire to the mountain, and enter a Zen monastery and practice 8 hours a day. You just start wherever you are, and you can make favorable changes, but understand that the habit is obviously better. Same thing with exercise. A single exercise event can change DNA methylation, epigenetic expression favorably, one single time. Keep doing it, and it's, the benefit of it is so far reaching. There was a paper that came out not too long ago really arguing that all of the benefits of exercise come from the epigenetic influence. As I said, we can pass some of those down. And the older you are, the more bang for your buck you get with exercise. Exercise will turn back on those previously inhibited tumor suppressor genes. As we age, our risk for cancer rises exponentially. And a piece of that is, and again, this goes back to the program aging conversation, is that we reliably shut down our tumor suppressor genes. These genes that keep us clear of cancer, we start to hypermethylate them and inhibit them. I mean, what the heck is that about? Exercise turns them back on, as do these polyphenols. It's exercise is like a physical polyphenol. Isn't that wild? Isn't that wild? Exercise is like eating a vegetable.
That's crazy.
I know. It's so cool. And it doesn't take a lot. So one exercise event can be beneficial, but then again, the lasting habit is good. And we could have a whole nother conversation of, are we doing high intensity? Are we, doing something low and slow? I mean, what are we doing? Are we doing weights? Resistance training. There was a study that came out not too long ago, specifically beneficial for mitochondrial DNA methylation. So pretty cool. I think we do what we love, what we're good at, what we're consistent with. And our study, a very gentle prescription of 30 minutes, 5 days a week minimum, perceived exertion 60 to 80% of max. So not intense, but it was the consistency that we thought was important. Over exercising can be pro-aging. I mean, anybody who is a competitive athlete, I mean, I know when I was a cyclist in med school, I was racing competitively, and I would always crash at the end of my season. You know, I'd always have an upper respiratory infection, always. You know, you just wear yourself down with the stress of repetitive, you know, really high intensity events. And, you know, it's pretty common that you get a cold or you get sick for a while. So over exercising can be a pro-aging. But, you know, I still love high intensity interval training. I just, you know, I'm just a little bit more mindful about it. And I do pay attention to my biological age, and we can talk about that as well.
That will have to be on round 2. I cannot believe how fast this went. This is so fascinating to me. Where can people follow you? Where can they get the book?
YoungerYouProgram.com or drkarafitzgerald.com. So clinic and everything else, drkarafitzgerald.com, book, YoungerYouProgram.com. And we also have an app where we have IRB, we're researching. IRB, Institutional Review Board, means we have permission to continue to do research. So in our app, which you can find at Younger You Program, you can jump in and join us on this continued research. And the next, you know, data that we're looking at is awesome. It's exciting, and I just, you know, look forward to publishing on it soon.
I can't wait. That'll be a lot of fun. Guys, you will love the book. Check it out. If you're as obsessed with aging backwards as I am, this is another fun one. Be sure to check it out. And speaking of things that you should check out, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe. And until next time, my friends, be legendary. Take care. Peace.